going to start off with our keynote speaker. It's going to be Matt Apfel from Samsung. So let's go ahead and give Matt a warm round of applause as he comes to the stage. Matt.
Thank you. Thanks. Nice job. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. Great day for VR, right? I'm Matt Apfel, for those who don't know me. I lead creative content and strategy programming for our VR initiative here at Samsung. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was how great it is to be here, all these wonderful things you're going to see over the next couple of days. But before we did that, I wanted to talk about when Carl first asked me to do this keynote. I figured we'd have 20 or 30 people in the room, you know, close friends of VR. We'd have some coffee, we'd have some donuts, and then we'd talk about the future for a couple of hours. Well, looking around this room, I realized that we have a few more friends than we thought, and that's a really great thing to see. As you'll see from the keynote, my topic today, or my theme, is the power of community. And I realize that that's a horrible corporate cliche. But in this case, it's actually true, and I want to talk about why. Much of what I'm going to say this morning is from Samsung's perspective, observations, things that we've observed, being one of many players in the space. But we can't do it alone. We're very aware of that. And if VR is really going to take off as a consumer behavior, if we're going to deliver on the storytelling premises and the power of immersive storytelling, all these different things that I think everybody in this room feels, we're going to have to do it as a community. So no matter what I say, no matter what we look at, this is not about one specific company, one specific entity, or one specific person. It's really going to take a collective effort to pull this off. So that's kind of the first ground rule. I wanted to start by showing one kind of defining image that for me, just me, crystallizes what I think the opportunity is and kind of where VR all began. Let's see if this thing works. Guys, any advance there in back? Ah, there we go. So what is that? Anybody over 40 knows that's a GAF ViewMaster. It's not a Samsung prototype. It did not have 360 video. It did not have spatial audio, much to be desired. But when you really think about it, jokes aside, this was a device that really, for me, was one of the first examples of VR, and let me explain why. It took a very traditional, kind of known form of media, the photograph, and it used technology. It was rough, but it used technology to really kind of advance the way you interacted with that photograph. And that's really important. We can split hairs over whether that's AR or whether that's VR, but I think the point is obvious. We're facing many of those same challenges today, right? We have games, we have video, we have applications, we have all these things that exist in the so-called linear world. And I think the number one challenge that we're facing is how we can take those experiences that the world already knows, much like the good old-fashioned ViewMaster, and how we can make them more immersive, more compelling, more dynamic in VR. So that's sort of what I always think about when I'm like, where did this all begin? What I wanted to do now, before we move on, is talk a little bit about how technology has advanced the cause. And thankfully, I think that we've seen this sort of tremendous improvement in this technology. So let's watch a quick video to show you how far we've come.
I'm not going to try to explain it to you. I just want you to experience it. Put that on.
Oh, wow.
Oh, snap. Holy
Look
moly.
up.
This is crazy.
Oh my god. Oh my gosh, this is too real. This is too real.
All that powered by the Galaxy Note 4.
Oh, what? Seriously? What?
That's crazy.
Shut up.
No way.
Oh my god. I've just clicked Pacific Rim, and it's like starting up the game now.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. I just feel like I can touch it.
You're really immersed in it.
I want to do this every day. I've never experienced anything like this. Do I have to give these up now?
Yeah, you can take them off.
All right, shameless Gear VR plugs aside, I promise that's the last one for the day. But I think the images from that video really are important, and they convey a couple of really crucial points that I want to make to you guys. First of all, those weren't actors. Those were folks having their first VR demo and their first experience. And I think everybody in this room, whether it's a Samsung device or any other device, when you give that kind of a demo, you've all seen that before, right? So that to me is the good news, right? That's you know, if we repeat that a lot, we will have, there's something here. But that video also demonstrates our greatest challenge, and that's a pretty simple one. Forget about the rest of the world for a second. There are 300 million Americans that haven't had that demo. Right? So our challenge is to get out, make as much content as we can, whether it's games, whether it's apps, whether it's video, as a community, and to make sure that everybody who tries on that device has the exact same reaction that you saw in that video. That's a pretty monumental task, to be quite honest. But that, again, that reinforces what I was saying earlier about the community, that we can't do this from Samsung's point of view. We can't do this from only one app or one standard or one company out there with thought leaders. We really need to do this from a community point of view. So let's transition now, and I'll talk a bit about some of the high-level trends that we've seen as one of the early players in the space. So first thing, again, we talked about it ad nauseum already, but Samsung is not alone. We're seeing tremendous uptick in platforms, in studios, in app companies, all different players across this ecosystem, independent, large, or small, kind of going out and making content and looking into this, which is great. At the same time, we're seeing accelerating investment, right? It makes perfect sense. VC firms, private equity shops, brand holding companies, studios, even sports leagues are all looking at how we can invest in VR and how we can kind of build this ecosystem together. I think that's another very important proof point, and they go hand in hand. Another really important thing to think about is that it's an emerging ecosystem. We're not just talking about entertainment anymore. Entertainment might be the tip of the spear, but we're already seeing workflow companies and camera companies and folks that are doing things with industrial uses of VR. So while all the cool video we're making and all the cool games that are out there are probably getting the lion's share of the press and of the attention, I think the ecosystem is what's really going to make it into a platform. And so that's exciting to see as well. And then the fourth thing to talk about here is growing awareness. I think I read a stat a week ago that said in America about 50% of the consumers in America now feel that they're aware of VR, or at least they think they're aware of what VR is. So you can look at that, and to Carl's point earlier, you can say that's great news, right? Because 6 months ago or a year ago, VR as a consumer product didn't really exist. But you can also look at that as a big challenge, right? 50% of the people haven't or don't know what VR is. They haven't experienced it. They kind of read the stories and need to kind of have their hands held a little bit as they grow and they try to kind of learn and explore what this platform can do for them. So that's kind of a big look at the state of VR. Here's a bit of how it's trickled down to Gear VR. We have a hardware maker's dream in some respect, which is strong adoption and low returns, right? That's what we strive for as a device company. So far, there's been about 70 apps launched in the first 120 days, give or take a few days, give or take a few apps. I think that's a pretty good number, but it also illustrates that it's not easy to make content in VR, right? And that's one of the things that we're here to do today, and this week, really, to learn more about how we can make this at scale and how we can make that number 7,000, 7 million, et cetera, in the years to come, as Carl talked about. The emphasis so far is on games and video, but again, as I talked about earlier, that's the tip of the spear. We're really excited to see things like sports training apps coming into play. We're seeing medical devices, medical uses, a lot of B2B apps. So, you know, just getting started on that, but it's great, and I want to emphasize that it's not just games and video that's going to make this an ecosystem. It really has to kind of build off of that consumer awareness. And then the final thing I want to talk about on this slide is that great content is driving sales. And I have a specific anecdote for that. So one of the things we launched with Kite, Lightning, and Lionsgate was an Insurgent piece. And we noticed not only a big uptick in use that day, but we actually noticed an uptick in sales that day. So what that taught us, again, it seems pretty obvious, but you can literally measure day-to-day activity when you have great content. And that's what we think is going to be the calling card, or whatever, the Trojan horse that gets people to try these devices. And that if the content is great, and if there's enough of it there, well, then people will stick with them and buy more of them, but more importantly, keep using them. How is this translated into Samsung's content efforts? I want to talk real quickly about a little bit about that. For those of you who don't know, we launched Milk VR as a companion service, a video service to go along with Gear VR. And it was a pretty simple equation, right? You can see that in the first bullet. Mobile plus video equals simple. Mobile plus video equals simple. We make phones, make a lot of phones. Everybody watches video, simple, right? That was really the thought process behind launching Milk VR. But it went a little deeper than that, obviously. We knew that if people bought a VR device, we wanted them not only to get excited about it, but we wanted them to come back to it. Come back to it every day, come back to it every week, come back to it every month. Get your mind blown by really great, new, compelling content, whether we create it or anybody in this room creates it. So that was the premise behind launching Milk VR. We wanted to cultivate this daily VR viewing habit, which is super, super important. We don't want people to necessarily throw away their TVs. We're not telling them to put down their phones or don't use a tablet. We need people to adopt this as a consumer behavior and to come out and find new things to explore and experience every time they pick up a device. Again, whether it's our device or somebody else's. The positioning of the service is inside access to unexplored worlds. And I'll give you a couple of examples as to how we're bringing that to bear. It could be something like a courtside seat at an NBA game, which we did with the NBA. It could be going backstage or in the green room on Lip Sync Battle, which is the integration that we did with Spike. Or it could be something like 30 minutes of backcountry snowboarding that we did with our friends at Mountain Dew and Brain Farm. So lots of examples as to how we're trying to use VR to take people to places they couldn't necessarily experience. But more importantly, that once they get there, they experience this in a way that's really different, really compelling, and really immersive. But there's another part of content, if you will, for Samsung, and that's that fourth bullet there, the growing community. For us, one of the greatest things to see has been how many people have registered to distribute content with Milk VR. And I imagine the folks at Oculus are living this the same way with games, with apps, and with that platform as well. We've seen very quickly people getting better at storytelling. They're driving innovation. They're doing really compelling and interesting things. And I'm excited to talk to you about some of the things that Samsung's going to do to support them going forward. But first, I did want to show just a couple of quick examples. I know you can't demo in VR; it's a tragedy. But you got to listen to me talk about them, and then obviously watch them in the booth. So this first piece was Beer with a Grizzly Bear, and it's pretty clear. The title speaks volumes. What was great about this piece was that instead of just putting a camera down in Montana and turning on the camera and seeing what you got, the filmmakers here chose to introduce a couple of elements. Right, the bear had very bad table manners. But you get a sense that it's not just a trip to Montana, something's going to happen here. Something's going to keep you compelled as opposed to here's what the trees look like or here's how blue the sky is today. Just a really nice way to take, I guess, what I would call unscripted or reality TV, if you will, but make it into something fun and compelling. Plus comedy, it had some in that. Second piece I want to talk about is something called fractal zoom. And we think this has real potential because it's kind of reinventing what a music video can be, right? It's not just the animation and the way that the headset or the VR experience can kind of navigate you through these odd, interesting, compelling shapes. It's that the creators took it and put it to great music. So we think that rather than going out and necessarily shooting a lot of people, rock stars and artists on stage, there might be a really interesting way to kind of marry animation and music to make, again, what is a VR music video? Every piece of this ecosystem is being thought out, and this is something that we hadn't seen before. The last piece is something called 1157, and this is a frightening horror film. Trust me, our engineering guys in Dallas have seen every possible video. They are the most jaded folks in the world, sorry guys. Even they were emailing me about how terrifying this is. And what I love about it, again, getting back to that GAF Viewmaster piece, right? This is a very traditional type of storytelling. It's the horror movie, it's the slasher flick. But what the filmmakers here did was they were able to use 360 to have the action unfold around you. They had spatial audio to make you feel like there were different things happening. They took this, again, very staid, very kind of traditional form of storytelling and showed how it can be much enhanced and much improved with 360. So we're very excited to do more of that, although I don't know if I'll be able to handle 60 minutes. It was really a great piece. So these three examples are showing kind of independent content that's already out there, right? This is stuff that, frankly, we didn't necessarily expect we'd get. We certainly didn't know how much volume and quality we'd get, but I think the answer is high for both. And so our challenge is, how do we help people out there? How do we help this community do more of that? How do we really turn the independent content community loose? And I'm happy to announce a couple of big initiatives today. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is, in the coming weeks, we're going to be launching a branded community channel inside of Milk VR. And obviously, you're going to see films like the ones I just highlighted, but our hope is that this is going to become a sustained, ongoing effort to really bring you the best storytelling out there, coming from as many different sources as possible, not just from things that Samsung or our partners think are great ideas. Super, super important initiative for us, and we would love to replicate that with apps, with games and services. But again, we started with mobile video because that's the place where we are right now. But we're not just going to highlight and showcase the films. I think it's really important to talk about the challenges and the rewards and how we're going to ignite that community. This is going to be an ongoing effort. We're going to have brands coming into it. We're going to have A-list talent. We're going to have VR mentors, the best in the world at what they do. There's going to be real challenges and calls to action for people to not only make video, but to monetize it and to get real feedback and real rewards for doing so. So I would urge everybody here to kind of stay tuned and really keep in touch with what's going on, because if you are an independent filmmaker or an independent content creator, just know that we're listening, and that going forward, this is going to become a really, really important piece of what we're doing. So my time is almost up. I'm trying to keep it on the brief side this morning. But before we wrap, I wanted to, I started off with that ViewMaster that kind of showed where I think VR began. I wanted to wrap up with an image that would show where I think VR can go, or VR can take us. That's a photo of my mom. She's 83 years old. That was her first demo, probably two and a half months ago. And going into this thing, I was actually kind of nervous. This is a woman who didn't have TV until she was 15. She still uses a Gateway PC, that's right. And I mean, I literally, would she understand it? Would she look up? Would she look down? Would her hair catch on fire? I had no idea. So I just went for it and gave her the rig and said, check it out. So she starts watching the video, and after about 15, 20 seconds, you see that reaction, just like the video I showed, right? She's looking around, smiling, and then she just starts laughing and giggling, just like all these other demos. And again, she's 83 years old and not what you would call a technology expert. Anyway, she put down the device, and I said, well, what'd you think? And she said, wow, this is really, really great. I never have to drive to the movies again. And before I could even say anything, she said, now when are you going to get Game of Thrones? So, it shows that even, it doesn't matter how old you are, you're never too old to see the future, is what I think when I see that image. But when I see everybody out here in this room, and the people that are even not in the room but thinking about VR, I realize that we are building that future, right? That we're doing it one game, one app, one experience at a time. We're off to a good start, but if I have one kind of challenge or charge to this group as part of this keynote, it's let's keep going, right? Let's get better at everything we're doing. Let's improve, but most importantly, let's do it together. Thank you.